And welcome to the Cedar Falls regular city council meeting this February 5th, 2018. I'll now call this meeting to order and ask for a roll call from Madam Clerk, please.
Miller.
Here.
DeBoer.
Here.
Cruz.
Here.
Blanford.
Here.
Dara.
Here.
Wheeland.
Here.
Green.
Here.
All members are present, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item C, is there a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting January 15th?
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Are there any agenda revisions, Madam Clerk?
I have no agenda revisions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item E is one of our favorite things to do. I'll do a quick point over to Director Olson for introduction of our guests today.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tonight we have the privilege of swearing in 4 new public safety officers for the city of Cedar Falls. So I'd like to give you a quick bio of each one of them. Kevin Hernandez is a graduate of the Cedar Falls High School. He was employed as a Blackhawk County Sheriff's deputy. He is a certified officer and has already attended the Iowa Police Academy. He was a former Cedar Falls Police Reserve officer. He served here as a reserve officer while working at the Sheriff's Office. He has an associate's degree in police science from Hawkeye Community College. Nolan Young is a graduate of Rockford High School. He was employed as a community service officer with the city of Cedar Falls for just shy of a year. He's currently a student at Hawkeye Community College pursuing a law enforcement degree. He did attain an automotive technology associate's degree from North Iowa Area Community College in the past. Admir Babik is a graduate of Waterloo East High School. He was employed as a residential officer for the 1st Judicial District in Waterloo. He has an associate from Iowa Central Community College. He also has a bachelor's degree in criminology from William Penn University. He played soccer at both colleges on a scholarship. And then Adam Hancock, he's a graduate of Dubuque Hempstead High School. He was employed part-time at Hy-Vee while attending college at the University of Northern Iowa. He will graduate with a bachelor's degree in criminology from UNI in May of this year.
Cool.
If you gentlemen will come up, I will administer the oath of office, and then I will do the pinning on of your badges. If you could raise your right hand, please. Repeat after me. I state your name. Do solemnly swear that I will support and comply with the Constitution of the United States of America, the Constitution and laws of the state of Iowa, the charter laws and ordinances of the city of Cedar Falls, the rules and regulations of the Cedar Falls Police Department, the Law Enforcement Code of Ethics, and that I will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of my position as Public Safety Officer to the best of my ability. Outstanding. We have those folks come up, depending on the badges. Folks, let's welcome Cedar Falls' newest highness.
Congratulations, Kevin. Thank you. Congratulations. Welcome. Congratulations. Welcome. Welcome. Congrats. Thank you. Congratulations.
Congratulations, welcome. Congratulations, welcome.
Would you let Denny know that we're probably okay to continue as opposed to go to recess? Are we good? Great, thanks. Moving on to item F, special order of business. F1 is a public hearing on the proposed plans, contract, and costs for the 2018 street construction project. Is there a motion to receive and file the proof of publication?
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Any written objections filed with the city clerk?
I have no written objections on file, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item C is oral comments. Before we have that, I'd like to have our city engineer, John Ressler, give us a brief update on this, please.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I just want to give you a quick rundown on our 2018 street construction project. For our new council members, the plans are currently completed. They are out for bid. The project will be let on February 13th, but there are some things with the project we just want to remind everybody of, so we wanted to make a quick presentation on the project. So, street reconstruction, these are the streets that are scheduled for reconstruction, and when we mean by street reconstruction, it's more of major type repairs, reconstruction. In fact, 12th, 4th, and East will be completely torn out and reconstructed. There are some utility work with those streets as well. And then also part of this, we have 2018 street restoration, which are, I would call more minor work, some spot repairs for curb and gutter, a lot of asphalt overlays. So in total, there are 16 street sections that we will be reconstructing or restoring, and it's about, I believe, 4.6 miles of total roadway. So a couple of streets we wanted to point out, so everybody's aware, would be 4th Street and also 12th Street. They have, with the construction sequencing, there are significant impacts to traffic in the schools in the area. So with this staging, we have worked with the school districts to come up with this. Unfortunately, for both projects, we can't get everything done during the summer when school is out of session. So we do have to close the roadway. And also due to the width of the roadway, we really don't have the ability to close half of the roadway and run head-to-head traffic on the other portion, so we need complete closures. So this is the proposed staging for West 4th Street from Hudson to Angie. South on the page, there are 2 schools that will be impacted. So we're certainly trying to minimize those impacts. So stage 1 will be done this spring when school is still in session. So it is a shorter section. We could only go that distance because Chateau Court, there's only one way in and out, so we could only go halfway to allow those residents to have access. So that will have to be closed in the spring while school is ongoing. We will not allow stage 2 to begin until school is out because that Angie Drive, West 4th Street intersection is extremely busy with traffic at the beginning of school and when school lets out. So stage 1, as it says on the slide, 20 working days, Hudson Road to Chateau, and again, completed prior to the Cedar Falls last day of school. So there will be some impacts and some detours for traffic wanting to get to the school. Stage 2, 35 working days, and that takes it from Chateau to Angie. It may look, when you see 20 working days and 35 working days, it may seem like, well, certainly can't we squeeze that in during summer break, but it's working days. So typically the contractors don't work on weekends, they don't work on holidays, and then if there's bad weather, they can't work, that's not charged as a working day, so it really extends the project out. So we really didn't feel we would have the ability to get this roadway done in the summer and not have any impacts to school. But we have been working with the school district. They are aware of this, and they're in agreement with our plan. The other one I wanted to briefly touch on was West 12th Street because of the high school. Again, we have some similar challenges here where we can't get all stages completed during the summer months when school is out. So we start with stage 1 while school is in session. That does keep the intersection of Division open. So once school lets out, we move on to stage 2 and stage 3. Stage 1, 25 working days, Clark to Division. Again, completed prior to school letting out, and then they go on to stage 2, and then finally stage 3. But we cannot get stage 3 done, we don't feel, prior to the start of school. So that will be closed for a portion in the fall as well. We feel it will have less of an impact because the streets near the school division in particular and 12th are still open. But it's just something we can't avoid due to the construction and the nature of the roadways. But we felt it was important to bring this to you so everybody's aware of the challenges that we face in getting these streets reconstructed. But again, we talked to the school district. We know it's going to be an inconvenience, so we've looked at ways to reduce schedule, and the school district has reviewed it as well, and everybody's okay with that. Any particular questions on that? Yes.
On 4th Street, is there any configuration of changes for the lanes, or is it the same as what's there now?
4th Street, it's the same as what's there now. There is a slight narrowing. We go from 31-foot back-to-back to 29-foot back-to-back. The reason we're doing that is that was a decision that was made on an existing section of 4th Street. There is a shared bicycle lane, vehicle lane. So in an effort to calm traffic, the decision was made to reduce the roadway width from 31 back-to-back to 29 back-to-back. And that just is a continuance of what was already constructed.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
As it is for item C, I'll also open up any oral comments for the public hearing. You can come to the microphone, sir, and please. Please speak.
Dr. Michael Kral, 412 Chateau Court, Cedar Falls. I own a house that borders from Chateau Court to Hudson Avenue. There's been a fair number of accidents at the corner of 4th and Hudson, and just want to make people aware that the concrete kind of just spits you clear out at halfway into Hudson on a day like today, and maybe just a little bit of foot or two of flatness before you get your front bumper out in the middle of Hudson would be advantageous to the general public. Also, there's a little bit of a waterfall issue at the corner of Chateau and Hudson where we have Lake Chateau. Not much, it dries up pretty good, but it does cause the school children to divert, and they don't like that at all. So it's more of a make sure you get your elevations right, I guess.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Anyone further for oral comments? Hearing and seeing none, I'll declare the hearing closed. Item F2 is a resolution approving and adopting the plans for the 2018 street construction project. Is there a motion, please?
Move approval.
Motion second. Any further discussion from council? Requires a roll call vote, please.
A voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item 3 is a public hearing on a proposal to undertake a public improvement project for West 1st Street and to authorize acquisition of private property for said project. Is there a motion to receive and file proof of publication?
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Item B, any written objections with the city clerk?
I have no written objections on file, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks. Item C is oral comments. Once again, we'll have staff member David Sturch give us a brief update on this public hearing.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. West First Street construction project has been ongoing for the past few years. This is a cooperative project between the city and the DOT. We had a public informational meeting a couple weeks ago, and at that meeting we had about 60 people from the public there to hear the right-of-way needs for their properties. This public hearing here tonight basically starts the process to move ahead with that right-of-way acquisitions of the project. I'd like to back up here a little bit. Last summer, the council may remember that with that cooperative agreement, we entered into the DOT last August, and followed by some final design contracts with Schneider and Associates. So that basically started the design process, or final design process, in this project, and we're about 60% completed on that. So we're at the stage now where we can start the acquisitions, or basically start the appraisal process and get the appraisals out to talk with those property owners and meet with them and discuss those areas along their property line.
Very good, thank you. Also open up this portion for oral comments.
Good evening. Roger White, 2303 Greenwood Avenue. Mr. Mayor and members of council. I'm also chair of the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and I'd like to say I'm speaking for them tonight, but we don't meet till tomorrow night, so I can't do that. But I'm speaking for myself right now, and I think after tomorrow night I'll be speaking for our committee. The issue is with regard to some accommodations for pedestrian crossing somewhere in the midpoint between Franklin Street and Hudson Road. Right now there's a light at Hudson Road that has pedestrian activated crossing, and there's a light at Franklin Street that has pedestrian activated crossing. It's a 4-lane road. It's going to be a 5-lane road, so crossing is going to be at least as challenging as it is right now, and perhaps greater, more challenging with the addition of the 5th lane. The distance between those two lights, if my odometer is correct, is about 1.4 or 1.5 miles. That means that anybody that's going to cross, and there are good reasons to cross, there are a lot of residential people on the north side, a lot of businesses on the south side, including some very popular ones. There's an ice cream place there that draws a lot of business. They will have to, whether they're walking or bicycling, they will have to go all the way to either Hudson or down to Franklin in order to cross. What's needed is one, or perhaps better yet, two pedestrian activated crossing mechanisms in that span. I think a hawk is the one that is probably preferable, because it only is activated when a button is pushed by the person who wants to cross, and then it flashes for the motorist to stop so the pedestrian can cross, and then I assume that would also be accompanied by a marked crosswalk. So that would be my pitch to the council, that be included in the project if it's not too late. And after our meeting tomorrow night, if it is the will of the committee to take that as a committee position, I will communicate that to you folks in the usual manner that we do.
Thank you, Roger.
Thank you very much.
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
Any other oral comments before we? Yes, sir. If you don't mind stating your name and address.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I know several of you. My name is Jeff Johnson. I reside at 923 West First Street. My family has occupied that territory for 130 years, being some of the original residents of Cedar Falls. I have a couple of concerns with the project of First Street. Is the width that we are going, it's increased since the last time that we talked. And what concerns me is, as watching the snowplows come through today, the amount of snow that rolls up, we currently have an 11-foot wide parking, and that's going to be down to 7. And so by the time from curb cut up to the property right now, on the front of my house, there's a deck. I'm going to be a 9-foot distance from my front steps of my deck to the close side of the sidewalk. Now my question also then would be, am I going to be fined for a car hanging over my parking over onto the sidewalk? I have a couple of sons that live with me and a couple of cars, so I'm limited to that. But it really concerns me about the snow height. By the time I clean my sidewalk and I get the extra lane on, two of my sons have almost been T-boned already just coming out of my parking lot, out of our drive. And with this, I'm losing my side turnaround that would allow me to turn around to pull onto First Street. Now I have to back onto First Street with this new proposal, or pull into the street and back into my drive. That is a major concern that I have. Plus, that's pretty much my concern. And will my taxes be decreased, which I know that I will talk, and I've talked extensively with John, and he's assured me that we will have a meeting to set up arrangements. I just would like to have the same safety concern for the residents and our families as the concern that we're having for the people that are driving down First Street. It is a concern. It is busy, I understand, but it's my choice to live on First Street, but I'd also like to have a safe place to live on First Street.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you.
Anyone further for public comment? Hearing and seeing none, I'll declare the hearing closed. Item 4 is resolution approving a public improvement for the West First Street reconstruction project. Is there a motion, please?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Motion and second. I will open it up to council for questions or comments.
Are we at a point where these requests are beyond reason, or are these things we're still taking into account?
No, these comments, we will still continue to work with the property owners. I think we might be setting up some meetings with those owners and with staff and the consultant to go over those details.
Thank you. This, like you mentioned before, this is the public hearing to go forward with at least the process of appraisals, and we've got a ways to go anyway.
Right.
Anything further from council? This requires a roll call vote, please.
I'm voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item G is old business. G1 is Pass Ordinance 2917, amending Chapter 26 of the Code of Ordinances relative to changing the speed limit on University Avenue from Hudson Road to the east city limits from 45 to 35 miles per hour. It's a second consideration. Is there a motion, please?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion second. Any further discussions from council? Requires a roll call vote, please.
I'm voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item H is new business. H1 is the consent calendar. The following items will be acted upon by a voice vote with a single motion without separate discussion, unless someone from the council or the public requests an item to be pulled separately for the consideration. Is there any such request from the council? From the public? Hearing and seeing none, I'll summarize briefly the consent calendar. Item A is receive and file the resignation of Paul Gray as a member of the Library Board of Trustees. And B is to approve the recommendation of the mayor relative to the appointment of Kim Krantz to the Board of Rental Housing Appeals. I want to say thanks to both those folks for their service to the city. Item C is receive and file the committee of the whole minutes of January 15th relative to the Capital Improvements Program, the CIP, with the joint meeting with the P&Z, and bills and payroll. Item D is receive and file a communication from the Civil Service Commission relative to a certified list for the position of Traffic Operations Supervisor. E is receive and file departmental reports, monthly reports of December 2017. F is receive and file the 2017 annual reports of the Planning and Zoning Commission, the Board of Adjustment, Historic Preservation Commission, Group Rental Committee, Board of Rental Housing Appeals, and the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. I know that council would join me in thanking those folks for their service. Item G is approving applications for permits and licenses. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar, please?
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Any further discussion by council? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Item 2 is a resolution calendar. The following items will be acted upon by a roll call vote on a single motion without separate discussion, unless someone from the council or public requests that a specific item be considered separately. Please keep in mind there's a 5-minute limit for the public comment portion. Is there any such request from the council?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to pull Delta, Golf, Mike, and Alpha Bravo.
Delta, Golf, Mike, and AB Alpha Bravo. Anyone else from council pulling an item? Anyone from the public that hasn't been offered to be pulled yet? Hearing and seeing none, I'll read through the resolution calendar minus items D, G, M, and AB, if I have that correctly. Items A through I, except those items, are personnel items. Item J is a resolution approving the renewal of an advertising agreement relative to recruitment advertising. K is approving an execution of an extension for audit services. L is resolution approving and authorizing execution of a contract for CLEAR relative to investigations and background checks conducted by the Public Services Department. M, we are reviewing in a moment. N is approving a farm lease agreement relative to agricultural land. O is approving a temporary easement in conjunction with the levee system. P is approving and accepting completion of public improvements in Prairie West 7th Edition. Q is approving the certificate of completion for the 2017 sidewalk assessment project. R is approving a final statement of expenditures for the 17 sidewalk assessment. S is approving a certificate of completion and accepting the work for the 2017 street reconstruction project. T is approving the certificate of completion and accepting the work for the 2016 public sidewalk repair project. U is approving the certified completion for the 2016 permeable alley project. V is approving the certificate of completion and accepting the work for the Cedar Falls Industrial Park street patching project. W is approving execution of supplemental agreement for construction engineering services relative to the West 20th Street Bridge replacement project. X is approving and authorizing execution of supplemental agreement relative to the 2018 bridge inspection project. Y is approving the partial release of retainage funds for the University Avenue Reconstruction Project Phase 1. Z is approving and authorizing execution of a cooperative agreement for primary road project with the DOT for reconstruction of ramp terminals relative to the University Avenue Reconstruction Project Phase 3. AA is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of an assignment and assumption agreement relative to an agreement for private development and conveyance of development property. AC is a resolution setting February 19th as the date of public hearing on the proposed FY19 budget for the City of Cedar Falls. AD is a resolution setting February 19th as the day of public hearing for the proposed vacation and dedication of utility easements on Pinnacle Prairie Business Center North. Is there a motion to approve the resolution calendar minus those items polled?
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Any further discussion from council? Requires a roll call vote, please.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Reading item D to put on the table, a resolution deleting the pay for an employee in the position of firefighter in the Fire Operations Division. Is there a motion, please?
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second. We'll open it up for discussion to council.
Yeah, so I see public safety as one of the few aspects of city service where redundancy is more important than efficiency. And so I can't support removing this position as I've not been convinced that a PSO is a one-for-one replacement for a career firefighter.
Thank you. Any further council discussion or comments? Or staff? Or the public?
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yeah.
Doesn't this process have to happen regardless of whether that position is replaced or not, just for clarification's sake?
I was wondering the same. Jennifer?
Yeah, if I,
Yeah,
sorry,
actually,
yeah.
civil service positions, we want to make sure, and, well, when we delete the pay of someone leaving, so we have the logistics from a payroll standpoint, but then also we have in there about how we're deleting the position, and a lot of that just has to do with our civil service, that it shows, you know, someone's not there anymore, so we're deleting that.
Gotcha.
if I might, Mr. Mayor, we're not actually replacing one for one. We've actually started a class just today of public safety officers. So by the time we're through with this class, we'll have 36 public safety officers. And we've only attrited out, this would be the fourth fire position, so it's almost a 9-to-1 replacement at this point. So we have considerably more people available to fight a fire than we've had, I think, in the history of the department.
Very good. Thank you. This is on the table, requires a roll call vote, please.
6 voting aye, 1 voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item G reads a resolution establishing the pay for an employee assigned to the position of acting police lieutenant public safety officer in the Police Operations Division. Is there a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Any further discussion from council? Mr. Green?
Yes, I had a question on this. If by appending public safety officer to the title, does that mean that only public safety officers can apply for this position in the future as a police lieutenant? Is that how this works?
Mr. Olson?
No, it does not. This particular individual is going to serve as an acting lieutenant for 2 weeks in the absence of a supervisor on third shift. They just happen to be a public safety officer, but it doesn't matter whether they are or not in filling that position.
Okay.
Any further comments from council? Requires a roll call vote, please.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item M is a resolution approving and authorizing the purchase of a fire rescue pumper apparatus. Is there a motion, please?
So moved.
Motion second. Any further discussion from council?
Yes, I just had a question for the wording in the memo from Mr. Heath, where it said that it was looked at as the low bid approach. And having been in the Coast Guard and seeing my share of like low bid equipment, I just wanted to make sure or understand why we would go with a low bid approach for this rather than a best value approach.
I'll add to that too, Mr. Olson. I'm just assuming the fire rescue pumper apparatus is a fire truck?
Yes, it is. It's a fire truck. So when we go through the bidding process, if the low bid meets the standards or the qualifications, then we certainly want to go with that bid. But if there's a problem with that bid or we don't think it meets the standard that we need, we don't have to go with the low bid. So we can change that if there's a need. This particular truck, and if you don't mind, I'll just go beyond that question and explain a little bit about what we're doing here. We have currently 3 fire trucks plus a ladder truck for a total of 4 apparatus that can pump water. We typically replace fire trucks on about a 10-year basis or maybe a little shorter. We order a truck. So this is a new truck that we'll be ordering at the cost of $525,000 from Toyne, who actually is an Iowa company, which is kind of nice. They're made in Breda, and they do provide a significant number of trucks throughout the United States. Houston, Texas being one of their larger cities that they supply trucks to. So what we're going to do is purchase this truck and keep the existing 3 trucks that we have. So we'll end up with an extra one, but the oldest truck is a 1989 model, so it's one that'll be used as backup more than anything else because of its age, but that's a little history there behind the fire trucks.
Thank you. Any further discussion from council? This is on the table. Requires a roll call vote, please.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item AB is a resolution approving a College Hill Neighborhood Overlay Zoning District site plan for a commercial residential mixed-use development at 2119 College Street. Is there a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Before we have, this might be different for a resolution, before council comment or before offering public comment, I'm going to have Shane give the sort of an update or the brief just background and history on where this has been and where the staff recommends.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. I'll have a slide presentation here that they'll put up as well. So this is a request at the corner of College Street and West 22nd Street. It encompasses 3 different properties that the applicant does own. This property is located in the C3 commercial district, and it's located in the College Hill Neighborhood Overlay District. Because it falls within that overlay zoning district, it does require site plan review by City Council. This request is for site plan review only. This property is also within the College Hill Urban Renewal Area, which does allow for some type of incentives for redevelopment. However, that is not on the table tonight. This is just for the site plan only. We haven't received a request from the applicant for any incentives for this, and if that happens, it will need to come before City Council before a public hearing as well. So this is just the site plan that's before Council today. Wanted to give just a brief history. The applicant submitted an application back in January of 2017, so about a year ago. And what this slide is going to show is the original submittal by the developer showed a total of 63 units. It's a 5-story building, 63 total residential units with 132 total beds. In December of 2017, so about just a month or so ago, the developer resubmitted a revised site plan, which does increase the number of units from 63 to 83. So it did go up by the number of units. However, the total number of beds went down And if you see from this chart, it's mainly because the number of studio units went up from 24 to 60. The 2-bedroom units stayed the same. The 3-bedroom units were eliminated from 16 in the original submittal to 0 during the revised submittal, and then the number of 4-bedroom units stayed the same. So that's where you see the differences between the units and the beds between the original submittal and then the revised submittal back in December. Again, one of the things that is shown on this slide is the ground floor floor plan. This plan shows 2 retail areas, one commercial storefront off of College Street and another retail storefront off of 22nd Street. The rest of the ground floor area comprises an apartment lobby off of 22nd Street, so you can get in, and there will be an elevator there that can take an elevator up to the residential units above. And there will be some parking areas underneath the building. There will be a garage door where you can get into the parking, and there's an enclosed trash area within that area underneath the building. So those are the areas that kind of comprise the ground floor area of this building. Moving ahead, again, this chart, what I'm trying to show here is the original submittal from January 2017 originally showed just one commercial storefront area with a total of 3,060 square feet of that main floor area. And you can see there's about 1,000 square foot for the lobby access area and about 12,699 square feet for the parking area. The revised submittal shows 10,765 square feet dedicated towards commercial use, and you can see the percentages there. It did go up from 18% in that original submittal to 64% current. And again, the lobby access area went down a little bit to 848 square feet, and then that parking area at 5,146 square feet. So you can see the percentage breakdowns there of the original submittal and then the revised submittal. One of the things that staff looks at is determining the use of the building. Again, this property is zoned C3 commercial district. One of the things staff looks at is principal use, accessory use, the definition section in the ordinance. You look at the principal use, it's the main use of the land or structure. Accessory use is the incidental to the principal use. And then one of the things that we looked at is the College Hill Neighborhood Overlay District. It's a specific overlay district in the zoning ordinance. It's section 29160, letter G, and that section states that residential uses may be contained within principal commercial uses. And then that section also goes on to state that such residential uses are considered to be secondary or accessory to the principal commercial use on the property. And again, if you continue on in that section, section 29160G2, which also talks about the commercial district within the College Hill overlay area, it goes on to state that secondary or accessory residential uses that are established on upper floors of principal permitted commercial uses are allowed, and that no accessory or secondary residential uses that are established on the main, or they cannot be established on the main floor or the street level of a permitted commercial building. So looking at those definitions in the ordinance and then looking at the College Hill Overlay District, staff has interpreted in the past that going off of the ground floor area, majority of the area is over 50% commercial. Staff has looked at that main building as commercial in nature. Again, the staff report that was included in the council memo, there's a handful of prior cases, a couple on College Hill, one on West First Street, and over on State Street there, past determinations by staff within the last 5 to 7 years or so, where their staff looks at what the main use of the first floor is. So if it's over 50% commercial, that's the way it's looked at. And again, in this case, the main level commercial use is 64%. And again, there are no residential uses on this first floor. There is that small lobby area, and then you have the underground parking and the trash enclosure area. As far as parking goes, in the College Hill Neighborhood Overlay District, again, it's in that same section, 29160G2. It does state that on-site parking is not required for secondary accessory residential uses that are located on upper floors of a principal permitted commercial use. And again, looking at our parking section of the zoning ordinance 29177A2, there is a statement in there that exempts out on-site parking as well for secondary or accessory uses to a principal permitted commercial use. And in that section, it goes on to state that dwelling units must be located on that second floor or higher, and then the first floor must comprise of the commercial use. So again, in this instance, the developer is providing 65 on-site parking spaces, and I'll show on this slide, they are showing 18 parking stalls on the main level. So again, you'll go in, there will be a garage door that lets you in. There's 18 stalls on the main level. The developer is also proposing underground parking, so you'll go into that garage door and it will take you underground, and they will provide 47 parking stalls underneath underground. So that totals the 65 parking stalls. Again, this is a site plan review, so some of the other elements that staff reviews is building design, and here are some renderings of what the building will look like. One of these images is kind of as you're looking on 22nd Street, and another rendering is as if you're standing on College Street looking at the building. Again, 5 stories with the residential uses on the 2nd through the 5th story and the commercial on the main floor. One of the things that we'll review during the site plan process is building height in proportion to other nearby structures. This is an image which shows the height of the building. Again, 5 stories. It'll be about 63 feet, just under 64 feet in total height. And what this image that the developer provided is trying to show is the heights of adjacent buildings in the nearby vicinity. You have the Bartlett Hall, the UNI parking garage, Dancer Hall, and the St. Stephen Catholic Student Center, which all have similar heights. So again, this is just to point out kind of the proximity of some of those buildings in the neighborhood and what some of those heights are. What this slide is showing is more of a building elevation scale, as if you're looking on College Street. Again, you can see the building itself. And I think this image tries to take into account the elevation change on College Street. The image there on the left that I have called out is the Urban Flats building on West 23rd. As if when you head up to 23rd Street, the elevation does change as you're going up the hill a little bit there. So what this tries to show is just kind of the scale with the topography included as well. The slide before was just building height only, doesn't take into account that elevation change. This is trying to kind of show what that elevation change is with the street. Some of the other things that get reviewed during the site plan, again, looking at that height, it is 5 stories in height. If you look at the immediate area, most of the buildings right around there are 1 or 2 stories. However, as I pointed out in that slide before, there are other structures in the neighborhood that do have similar heights. Building setbacks, it is located in the C3 district. The C3 district does not require any setbacks. They are showing a 5-foot setback along College Street, 2 foot along West 22nd Street, and then 6 foot along the west and north property lines. Again, other elements that are reviewed is the trash enclosure plan, a lighting plan, landscaping plan. They did provide all that information as well. So looking at the ordinance and past interpretations by staff, it is Community Development Department's recommendation that the site plan be approved. This did go to the Planning and Zoning Commission 3 separate times, once in November and then twice in January. And at the last meeting on the January 24th, the Planning and Zoning Commission did recommend approval by a 5-4 vote. And just as a side note, this is a site plan only, approved by resolution, so it does not need any sort of supermajority vote. So whether this was voted for approval by the Planning Commission or denial, it wouldn't change the fact that council just needs a regular majority vote to approve this. So at this point, if you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to.
What I'll do here, folks, is if council approves, is before opening up to public, if you have any comments specifically to Shane's presentation, and then I'd like to open it up to the public. And as you know, after each speaker, I open it up to council to ask questions or make comments to each particular speaker as we go, if you so desire. Anything to Shane specifically in terms of what's in the packet and what was presented this evening? Mr. Burr?
Would you mind, Shane, going back to the slide that you had that showed the 5 different buildings when you were showing the character? Okay, my question is, in the overlay district, it talks about character in the neighborhood, and it looks like the other 4 buildings you have there look, unless that picture is not to scale, but it looks like this one is double the size of all of those. Is that correct?
Are you talking the building,
The 4 you have drawn there in that display, I can't read the numbers on them, but they look to be quite a bit smaller than this building as far as in height.
Right, yeah, if you're looking at actual height, yeah, so what they provided is 63 feet for the building in question. The St. Stephen Catholic Center, they list at a height of 40 feet, Bartlett Hall at a height of 49 feet, the UNI parking garage at 35, and then Dancer Hall at 159. So, yes, this building will be taller than several of those, not all of them.
Isn't one of the characteristics or requirements of the overlay district that the building be of character of the neighborhood? And with this being quite a bit larger, would that be considered character of the neighborhood?
Well, height is looked at, and that's, I think, what the developer is trying to point out is that if you do look in the immediate vicinity, most of the structures are 1 or 2 stories, but what they're trying to point out is there's other structures in the neighborhood that have similar heights. Now, will this be taller than most? Probably, but they are trying to point out that there are similar heights. And so the ordinance doesn't say this has to be the exact height of everything else. It just says that's something to be considered when reviewing this, is height with the surrounding area.
So how close is the closest 5-story building to it?
Well, again, the closest 5-story building, I mean, you probably have to look at Dancer Hall on the campus, which is about 2.5 blocks to the west, and that's 159 feet.
Parking ramp.
And then I have one other question, if I can. When I read through this, I also read through the R4 zoning. Did you not also refer back to R4? You mentioned the C3 and you mentioned the overlay, but you didn't mention R4. But yet, when you read through the C3 and the overlay, it directs you, if you look at residential uses, to also refer to the R4. So was that part of your analysis?
Yes, so I'll give you a little bit of background on that. So when the original submittal was submitted back in January of 2017 and went to the Planning and Zoning Commission in November, that was when the developer showed only 3,000 square feet, or about 18% of the main floor as commercial. So at that time, staff deemed that as a principal residential use. And based on that, as a principal residential use, then the ordinance refers back to the R4 district standards. The property is always zoned C3, but it says for principal residential uses in the C3 district, then you refer back to the R4 district when you talk about setbacks, building heights, things like that. So back in December, as I mentioned before, they submitted a new plan which showed a majority of that main floor commercial, and again, based on past interpretations by staff, staff deemed it to be then a principal commercial use, which then doesn't revert back to the R4.
So can you tell me where in the code then it talks about using only the first floor? I couldn't find that.
Yeah, it's not specifically in the code. Again, it was looking at the ordinance, again, past interpretations by staff, and then looking at the overlay district itself when it talks about residential uses may be allowed within commercial uses, and then those residential uses, again, are considered to be secondary or accessory. Again, that's in 29160G, where it states that those residential uses are allowed within commercial uses and are considered to be secondary or accessory. So based on that, and then again, past interpretations from the past several years on how that's been determined, that's how staff determined that.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further questions, at least point to the presentation?
So related to that, did I understand that there's no parking required? Did I misunderstand what you said about with the amount of commercial on the ground floor, no parking is actually required?
Correct. So it's in property zone C3 district, so the commercial uses wouldn't require any parking at all. And in the College Hill Overlay District, it states that for those residential uses located on upper floors, no parking is required.
Okay, I want to make sure I understood that, but he's offering 65 something.
Correct.
Okay. The other question then is, that's because it's in the overlay, that's unique, the parking is unique? Is this overlay similar to the overlay in downtown?
It's fairly similar, yes. There is a downtown overlay district as well, and the downtown overlay district refers you to the parking section, and then the parking section has an exemption for residential uses on upper floors. So the wording's a little different, but the College Hill overlay specifically says that those residential uses on upper floors do not require parking.
Does it make sense to have two different overlays? Is there a reason that the one on the hill is different than the one downtown?
Well, there's probably some differences between them. I guess I'd have to read them word for word. There's probably some differences between downtown and College Hill, and they're different parts of town and things like that. But they do share some similarities. And again, that College Hill overlay was adopted back in 1993. And I went back and did a little research, and this section referring to the commercial district and talking about the residential uses was added in 2005. So
I'm just wondering if there isn't some logic around having the overlays be the same, be similar. If we have more developments like this, it'd be nice to be predictable that if we do this kind of development here, it's going to be the same, just for future discussion. But
right, and we are starting to look at some ordinance revisions, and you're right, Frank, it does go back to the C3, to the College Hill overlay and the Central Business District overlay. There's a lot of similarities, so when we look at one section, we find ourselves looking at all three sections to make them more similar.
Okay.
Mr. Green?
Yes, with, let's see here, with the parking lot behind, with the new Great Wall building in between this proposed property, I couldn't tell from the diagrams if that was part of this project or if they're considering that Great Wall parking lot, like is that completely separate? And is there a way, is it something that would be expected for general use, or does Great Wall control that?
That's private property owned by the Great Wall property, so that parking area behind that building is on their own property. It's not part of this project.
Okay. And then with the city lot across, about where Sidecar Coffee is, that municipal lot just to the north of Urban Flats. As I understand it, that's all city controlled. Will that be open, say for nights and weekends for overnight use? Is that, just trying to see where that overflow might end up if there is.
I don't think that parking lot will be part of this development's parking, but I believe if you were to buy a parking pass for that lot, and I've had a conversation with the city clerk about this, I don't think that stops anyone from parking in that overnight.
Okay.
I'm not sure if enforcement's done overnight or unless that's police that checks that. So if someone were to park there, I'm not sure if they would get a ticket or not.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further before we open it up to public comment, Susan?
Just a question that came up to follow up on Frank's question. I'm not as familiar with the downtown overlay ordinance as I am the College Hill overlay ordinance, but it does say in the C3 that residential is allowed but not recommended. Is that what it also says in the downtown overlay? Is that it's permitted but not recommended?
I would have to go back and look. I don't know off the top of my head, but you're right. In the College Hill section, it does say principal residential uses are generally discouraged in the C3 district of the College Hill overlay, but then acknowledges that accessory residential uses are allowed as part of principal commercial uses or above on the upper floors of commercial uses.
Mr. Whelan?
I have some comments, but I'd like to hear from the audience first, so I recommend we go to them.
Sure, I'll open it up again for council if you're done as far as towards the presentation. Mr. Certainly open to the public. Gentleman here, if you would, please. Just state your name and address, if you don't mind, and 5 minutes.
I will, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, my name is Dan Manning, 317 6th Avenue, Des Moines, Iowa. I represent concerned citizens of the College Hill area who are opposed to this site plan, not because they're opposed to development, not because they're opposed to the applicant. They're opposed because the application that's before you is in direct violation of your zoning ordinance. And what we mean by that, I think, is because I think the best place to start is to go back to the staff opinion rendered in November, on November 17th of 2017. And in that staff report, there was one definition of a principal use. And it's the same definition that's in your zoning ordinance. And a principal use means the main use of land or structures. Means the main use of land or structures. So the application that was before the council, or I'm sorry, before the staff, and the staff recommendation was follow that definition. That definition makes no distinction about whether you're on the first floor or the fifth floor or the third floor. It says you look at the main use of the land, or you look at the main use of the structure. So that definition was the one that was used by the staff in November. It's in the staff report. And because of that, the applicant was told that their application did not meet the standards of the ordinance. They didn't meet the building setback requirements. They didn't meet the density requirements, the parking requirements, the green space requirements, the landscaping requirements. It didn't work. So that's November. Then in January, the only thing that changes is we have more units. We go from 63 units in this application to 83 units. Fewer beds, but more units. And the only thing that changed was about a 13% number on the first floor for commercial uses went to 65%. Now that's just the first floor. But there's nowhere in your code that says that you look to the first floor, but there is some place in your code that says you look to the structure, the entire structure. And that, from our perspective, only makes sense, because what you have now is a situation where you have 50,000 square feet of space, second floor, third floor, fourth floor, fifth floor, residential uses without any requirements. Any requirements about density, building setbacks, parking, green space, landscaping. So it was mentioned that there'll be 65, I think 64, 65 parking spaces, but your ordinance requires that you have 144 parking spaces. And so if you make the determination, if you follow the specific definition of what a principal use is, and we disagree with your staff on this issue of accessory uses, you never get to the accessory use standard if you have a thorough, clear read of what your ordinance says about the principal use. You don't, and I think it's the beauty of your ordinance that it says if you can have residential uses within C3, but you need to meet the R4 requirements. And those R4 requirements, we have too much density. And here's what I would suggest is for our perspective, just this becomes a runaway train. That runaway train is that we have, for example, there are no requirements for parking, but in this instance, you have a good person, good developer, means well, but he'll give you 64 parking spaces. Even though a different interpretation, we think the clear and unambiguous interpretation of your ordinance is to require the R4 standards within this C3 zoned area. If you do that, you're going to have the density requirements, the parking requirements that are not going to burden other neighbors because they're going to be required to meet the same standards that anybody else within the C3 zoning area has to meet. So from our perspective, we ask that you not approve this tonight, not because we're opposed to development, but we're opposed to this density. And this runaway train that I'm talking about is what happens when we have an individual who comes in, an applicant, a developer, who says, you know what, based on prior interpretation, I'm in C3 zoning, and I don't need to give you any parking. Now, 65 seems pretty good compared to 0, but it doesn't seem very good when your requirements are 144. So I know I don't have all the time I'd like to go through these issues, but I want you to understand we come from a place of, I'm not a resident of Cedar Falls, but my clients are. They love their city, they love what's going on in the city, but they simply cannot accept this because it's going to set a bad term that's been used, precedent. But that can, when you talk about precedent rather than the clear and unambiguous language of your ordinance, that's where I see this, see you getting into trouble. And I'm going to use the remaining period of my time, which apparently I'm out, is to pass out a letter that I had previously submitted today and ask that that letter, along with the two letters that I had submitted on November 21st of 2017 and January 10th of 2018 be received, filed, and made a part of the record for the city.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Manning. Any further comments or questions from council, the previous speaker? Anyone else want to come up? Thank you. State your name, please, and address.
Thank you. Oops.
Thank you.
You can wait a second if you want.
Hello, my name's Dave Deibler. I live at 1616 Campus Street with my wife and son. We also own a couple buildings on College Street, 22nd, so literally I'd be in the shadows of this development. I'm here to, I think it's important to be a part of the conversation. I'm very strongly in favor of this development. I don't want it to be, illegal or against any codes, but I think I was unsure of exactly what I was going to say tonight, but the aesthetic argument is one that concerns me greatly. The idea that this building is a little too tall or doesn't fit in. Let's remember that the College Hill neighborhood, I was 2 properties away from a hole in the ground for 14 years, where Stebbs was. So to pin what's going to happen in the next 20 years on the last 20 on College Hill is a dangerous thing. We need a whole new vision. We need to, I want to see other developments by other developers similar to this one. There's going to be problems. It's going to take some planning and some work together, but to not have this and keep the status quo on College Hill is unacceptable. I mean, I'm not going to say like, oh, we're in trouble, but we're in trouble. I mean, I hope that the student decline at UNI is temporary, but we need to really have to work together to have a vision for where we're headed. And this project has made it through P&Z, and I guess I'm not going to use all of my time here. What I'm going to say is, if it meets the code, let's pass it. And we need to keep in our mind to do more of this. And there again, because it doesn't fit in with what's there, let's not go there. Let's look for a new vision. Okay? Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. Any comments from council, Mr. Cruz?
Could I ask clarification on why College Hill's in trouble?
What's that?
Could you clarify why the College Hill's in trouble?
I would say because of the declining enrollment. I would say because we're primarily a bar and restaurant economy. I mean, is it? I'm not going to go there. But I would say that it has been, 10 years ago. I think some of the stuff that's happened right now is I don't think any of us thought it could happen. The lack of funding for our beloved university. I would just say, name me, Mr. Cruz, another part of Cedar Falls that's seen as little development as College Hill. We went almost 20 years without a building. So I guess when I say we're in trouble, maybe I was being a little, joking a little bit, but I compared to the development in downtown and south of town and west, I think that we really need a plan to move us, get us in sync with the rest of the city.
Thank you, Dave. Any further comments in relation to the previous speaker? Young lady.
Hello, my name is Maggie Miller. I reside at 615 West 20th Street here in Cedar Falls. I currently serve as the Director of Government Relations for Northern Iowa Student Government, so I'm here today on behalf of the students. First, I want to thank everybody. I know how, it's hard to be here some nights, and I appreciate everything you do for the city. Mayor Brown, we appreciate your partnership. And that's a lot of the reason why I'm here is because of the partnership that the city has with the university. We've seen a lot of, I think, growth in that partnership. We have proof of that right over there with Cade. We know you value our input. We know you value our presence within the city. I just want to start by saying we don't oppose the building or the development of this building. I love that there's going to be more places for students to live, especially so close to campus where they can walk. I live down on 20th Street, like I said, and I walk to campus every day, and it's a good area to be in. Our problem is the parking. As was mentioned tonight, there'll be 65 parking spaces for 120 beds. Keeping in mind that sometimes a couple might live in a studio, things like that. That's not ample parking for students. My understanding is that they've been operating under the assumption that students don't bring cars and that students would be the ones who primarily occupy that space. That's not true at all. Every student I know that lives off campus owns a car. Most students, even that live on campus, own cars. Students that don't own cars are typically freshmen who live in the dorms. But once you move off campus, there's really not a way to live in this city without a car. So that's really just unfeasible. We've had the same problem over at Urban Flats when Urban Flats was constructed. The understanding, I guess, was that all of those people living there would be UNI students or faculty, and they would have a UNI parking permit. The only place to park for the UNI parking permits overnight is in the R parking lot or the C parking lots. And the C parking lots are reserved for students in the dorms, so that excludes anybody living in Urban Flats. The Urban Flats would have to park in R, which is behind the dome. So if you kind of think of how far away that walk is, that's not really feasible for where you park your car while living in your home. Those are just our big concerns with this building. Northern Iowa Student Government will be passing a resolution on Wednesday. It'll be a reading and passing on Wednesday, saying that we don't support the building of this building without the parking spaces required. This would be detrimental to students who would have nowhere to put their cars. It'd be detrimental to the businesses on College Hill, who would undoubtedly be clogged up with students who just want somewhere to put their car when they don't feel like parking it however far away. That's really important to all of us. It will be sent to all of you guys. It'll be sent to you, Mayor Brown, and some other various city members. But yeah, if you have any questions.
Yeah, Maggie?
Yes.
Do you know what students pay on an annual basis for those two lots if they want to park their car there?
In the city parking lot or in the R parking lot?
In the R and C you mentioned.
I think it's around, do any of you know? I think it's around $79 or $80. Okay, so if you live on campus and you want to park in the C or R lot, it's $79 or $80. And Matt Johnson, who's on Northern Iowa Student Government as well, he said it goes up if you're off campus.
Yes.
Thanks for your time here. It was purported that this development would draw people from converted homes into this building. As a student, could you see that attraction if you're living already on a single-family home or duplex to move into something like this without any parking?
I think that the number one concern of students will always be price sensitivity. But I think that personally, if I were trying to decide whether I'd be living in a single-family home or moving into this apartment complex, if I knew there wasn't going to be parking, I wouldn't want to go live there. I don't want my car hit. I don't want my car ticketed. I don't want it booted, towed, things like that. So I think that, it's for sure a consideration of many of the students that have discussed this proposal.
Mr. Burr?
You mentioned R and C lot, and you said R lot is out by the dome, and that's where you can leave it overnight.
Yep.
Where is C lot, and can you leave it overnight at C lot?
If you live in the dorms, you can leave it overnight in C lot. C lot and CP lot are specifically reserved for students who live in the dorms.
Okay.
So C lot is kind of overflow for the CP lot, and it's right in front of the R lot. Okay. But it's still across Hudson, C and R.
So C isn't really an option?
Not for off-campus students, but those are the only two, C and CP lot, those are the only lots that you're allowed to park in overnight on campus.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Miller.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Miller.
I watched the P&Z meeting as well, and this question's more for staff, but I believe there were some questions raised about that Urban Flats development as well, and specifically regarding parking. Was there something that was clarified there, or is that still?
Shane, do you have anything on that, or any other staff?
You talking about Urban Flats? Sorry, Mark.
Yeah, is it the parking lot behind Urban Flats? I don't believe is for the folks that live at Urban Flats. I thought there was an agreement set up either with you and I or at the parking ramp. Was any of that clarified?
Right. Yes, there was. There was some wording in the leases for any tenants of that building that they had to provide or purchase parking passes from you and I for some of those specific lots. Now, that parking ramp doesn't allow 24-hour parking, the one about a block away, so they can't buy passes for that. So that is correct. The overnight lot is over by the dome. And it is in their lease, so anyone that signs a lease at that has to provide proof that they purchased a parking pass to the UNI lots. Again, the developer can speak to that a little bit, but I believe I included a letter in the council packet that states that they had to purchase parking passes, and there was a little statement there that the tenants have to sign. So.
Good.
Anything further? No, we'll keep it as is. I want to avoid a big debate. I don't mind the Q&A, and it's good to get the information out. But as far as the back and forth and debating, I think we're going to hold off on that at this point. Anything further from council? Yes, sir, Mr. Tiber. Oh, you know what?
Good evening. Name's John Tiber, Cedar Falls, Iowa, 1005 West 16th Street. I'm a Hill resident and a huge supporter. I go there no less than 4 times a week. Since this discussion's turned into a parking problem, I can certifiably say I've never had a parking issue more than a block from any establishment I've ever wanted to go there. Sidecar, yoga, milk box, it's not a problem today. I do not believe this development will create any additional problems. Market forces move faster than ordinances in this case. And there's clearly a product that's in demand. If you look in any city in the United States right now that's thriving, they embrace urban density. And there's no more appropriate spot for urban density than UNI's campus, a block away. And so I'm trying to understand the logic why we'd be opposing something that offers millions of dollars of tax base to the community, more connectivity, more activation in the College Hill area that'll bring more and more residents. And so I'm really excited for this project. I can't wait for friends and family to come through Cedar Falls, down College Hill Street and see this progress coming to my house, a place where they want to be, a place where they have to be. And so that's why I'm here speaking in favor of this project.
Thank you, Mr. Tyler. Appreciate it. Anyone else? Mr. Sires. Yep, sorry, I saw you get up earlier.
I'm Dr. Brian Sires, on 1939 College Street. Why is it that a highly unregulated apartment complex is being allowed in one of the most highly regulated areas of the city? How is it that an apartment complex in an area that most people agree is critically deficient in parking is going to be allowed with no requirement, zero requirement for parking? Now, I know the city guys, who are very nice, they say that there's only 144 parking places required under city code, but that's not what the code actually says. If you look at the College Hill overlay, section 160, and you add up what it actually says in the code, what it actually says in the code is that there are 196 spaces that are currently required by city code for an apartment building that's under the residential rubric, okay? And why is it that the density, the so-called density that everyone's in love with, why is it it's higher than anything that's offered elsewhere? The so-called density bonus is a 450 square foot bonus. For this project, that bonus, which is geared to help bring development, only allows 66 apartment units. The This one has 83. The reason for that is it's not under the residential rubric. Why is it allowed then? Because when you call it a commercial building, it doesn't talk about how many apartment units you can have. It just simply doesn't talk about it because that's not where it's supposed to be. This is an apartment building, pure and simple. It's got 50,000 square feet of apartments. The only reason to have the commercial on the ground floor is so by city sleight of hand, it suddenly becomes a commercial building. And it's not. The single definition of principal use in your city code says it's the main use of land or a structure. So it's the main use of a building. It's not the main use on the first floor. Guys, is there any place in the city code that says it's the main use of the first floor?
We'll address the question when
Oh, sorry. There is no such thing. I've been through the code and I didn't enjoy it. But there's no such thing, okay? The single definition says it's the main use of a building. So this building is 83% apartments and 17% commercial. And if you wanted to look at the income side, the overwhelming income side is going to be on the residential side. So these codes were developed over the years to take care of all the problems associated with buildings. And the residential side is where this one actually is. What they refer to, or where the mistake appears to be made, is they go to section 160 under the commercial side and they say residential is allowed above. Yeah, residential is allowed above in a principal commercial, but this is not a principal commercial building. This is a principal residential building. And then they go to 177 and they read about parking there and they say parking is not necessary for a principal commercial that has associated residential. This is not a principal commercial structure. This is a principal residential structure by everything that your code says. And if you would just call it what the code says, the rest would take care of itself because it's clearly expressed in your code. So that's the only point I want to make, is that this, by definition, in your own code, and no one will be able to refute what I've said, sorry, it's a residential.
You've got a minute, Doc.
It's a residential. That's what it is. And there's no disputing it. So that's why all of a sudden it's totally unregulated. Because the commercial side doesn't talk about these things. The commercial side allows things that the residential side does not. But 83% residential by square footage, that's not commercial. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for staff, the previous speaker? Next up.
Hi, I'm Danny Bigelow from 3909 Beaver Ridge Circle, Cedar Falls, Iowa. You know, this subject is one of the reasons people raise their eyebrows, I think, at political or politicians, because you can take a statement that is very clear. As Dr. Sires has pointed out, this is a primary residential building, which is so identified in your code, and then say, well, I don't think so in this circumstance. You know, a 3-year-old would look at this code and call this a primary residential building. Now, there are a lot of us that are in favor of appropriate development in the College Hill area. There's nothing wrong with that. There are a lot of things that are good for you, but you have to take good in moderation. A glass of orange juice a day is good for you, but a gallon every day probably isn't. If you have an apple for lunch, you probably don't want to eat a bushel basket full of apples. We have a situation here where we have a building that has roughly 13%, roughly 17% commercial and 83% residential with a primary residential revenue stream. There's no question about that. So to interpret that to mean that we have a commercial building is in my way of thinking, it's just impossible to reconcile. And I think that if you want to change the code, you have a protocol to do that. But in the meantime, I think that you have to embrace and support the code as written and as any common individual would interpret it. Now, I think Mr. Dahlstrom is doing a good thing in terms of his development and so forth. But you have to do it in an appropriate manner that takes into consideration the welfare of all the stakeholders. You've got the residents that are up there, you've got the commercial businesses that are up there, and you've got this developer and future developers. And I think that the city owes this developer and any future developers appropriate consideration for appropriate development up in that area, and not to burden the people that are already there, either the residential neighborhood or the commercial businesses. The fact that there is not a parking problem up there is not substantiated by any of the statistics or any of the information that you'll find if you talk to anybody that has a inherent communication with people in the College Hill district. Thank you for your time, and thank you for what you do for the city.
Thank you, Mr.
Thanks.
Maywell. Thank you. Council, any comments or questions to staff, previous speaker? Next up, can I have someone come, please?
Hi, I'm Cara Bigelow Baker. I live at 1826 Quail Run Lane, and I work at 2211 College Street at the Razor's Edge. In my opinion, this is an apartment building that is primarily residential. My watch is an accessory that I wear every day. My watch never wears me. So for me to ever say that my watch is the primary use of my body is false. And that's the way I look at this building. This building is ginormously residential, with a small portion of it being commercial. You can't look at it any other way. You can't look at it any other way from a parking standpoint. From a parking standpoint, there is going to be a ginormous need for parking for the residential tenants of this building, and a small portion of parking needs for the smaller portion of the commercial use of this building. Anyone who tells you that there is not a parking issue on College Hill may not have run into one themselves. I run into one every week. I had to tow a vehicle from our two-space lot last Thursday that had blocked me in. Had no idea who it belonged to. Had no idea where the driver was. I went next door and asked if there was anyone parked there. I called the tow truck. From the time that I recognized the vehicle to the tow truck came, 30 minutes. No driver. About 45 minutes after I had left, the driver came in, wondered where the car had gone. The driver was not a tenant. The driver was doing business somewhere else on the hill. I don't want to be that kind of person. I don't want to be the person that has to have cars towed. But the hill needs parking, and it's not the city's responsibility to provide parking for residential tenants. Now, the statement has been made that this building doesn't work for the developer if it's not allowed at C3 at 5 stories. This building doesn't work for me if it's allowed at C3 and 5 stories with no parking. I have a say. A lot of you campaigned on statements like it's time for change. I'm waiting to see it. We need to move our community forward without leaving people behind. We need to take stakes in our neighborhoods and make them accountable for everyone. I'm waiting to see that. I'm one of those people. I'm helping to maintain a business that has been on the hill for over 50 years. I think it's one of the businesses that has been there the longest. My customers drive. They don't live up there, they drive. I bring business to the area. My customers go to the establishments owned by the other people in the audience. They go to the sandwich shops, they go to the bars, they go to the tattoo shops, they go to the coffee shop. My customers spread out, but they aren't going to come if they have nowhere to park. And it has been severely congested since Urban Flats was allowed to develop without parking. But nobody wanted to fact check their parking plan. Yeah, they might be required to buy a university parking permit. They don't park in our lot. They park in the north lot behind their building. There are at least 23 cars who have parked there overnight every single morning. That's documented by a man that I work with. Planning and zoning erroneously passed this on to City Council. They ignored College Hill's partnership request for parking studies. I don't know why. I asked that question, it was not answered. I've heard of Band-Aid parking solutions that have been suggested regarding changing of the lot restrictions or having the city build a structure. When the city is going to build a structure, are the taxpayers going to get the same tax abatement that the developer may get for that structure? Who's going to pay for the tenant to walk through and ticket and to tow? This apartment building is not progressive as far as bringing more people to the Hill. It's going to recirculate college students that are already there. So is it a great-looking building? Yes, it is. Should it be constructed? Yes, it should. It should be constructed with responsible parking. That's the only way it's going to work for everybody. And that's the only way that it's going to work based on the campaign promises that all of you who ran for office stated. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments to staff and council?
Mr. Graham, I've seen a few different statements. What was the final recommendation of the College Hill Partnership in terms of this project? Was it in support of or not?
I believe the letter was in the council packet that the College Hill Partnership supplied. I don't think they gave her several different recommendations or concerns. I don't think they took an official stance on it. But in your council packet, you'll see they had just a couple of concerns about some parking, I think was one of them. And
were those addressed with them directly prior to the planning and zoning meeting, or was that sent in and that was the end of the discussion with them?
With the partnership?
Yep.
They submitted that letter prior to P&Z, so the P&Z Commission had that letter in their packet of information. I think one of the things in the partnership letter talked about a parking study. Now, I don't think the Planning and Zoning Commission has the authority to enact a parking study, but they still provided a recommendation knowing that that was in that letter.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Miller.
There was a comment made there about a tax abatement for this project. Can we get some clarification from staff on that? As far as a TIF or something along those lines?
I opened up talking about that a little bit. This area is in the College Hill Urban Renewal Area. Incentives can be provided for these types of redevelopments. However, that's not on the table at this time. That would come down the line when we receive a request from the developer for incentives, which would come before the council in a public hearing. So at this time, that's not on the table.
I'll follow up on that. R4 structure would have TIF and other incentives available for that also?
I believe it talks about redeveloping. If there's a certain dollar amount added, I think it's anything over, you have to put at least a $200,000 investment over what's there now, I believe is the basis of the.
So that availability would be whether it's C3 or R4 construction?
I believe so.
Anyone else? Hearing and seeing none. This item has been read. There's a motion, and we had discussion. This now requires any further discussion from council, as it's on the table again, or as it has been.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Whelan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A tough decision to make tonight. Over the last many years, we've had issues with not enough supply for students. As a result of that, entrepreneurs, at a time when interest rates were very low, were able to buy single-family homes, convert them into rental, put in egress windows, and disrupt single-family neighborhoods. That became an issue about 3 or 4 years ago when we developed an ordinance trying to restrict the use of single-family for multi-person usage if it didn't have the capacity to do that without disrupting the neighborhood. Now we have a project that's going into an area that we deem the best place to put high density, and that's the College Hill neighborhood area, where students are going to be the primary renters. So we have the advantage of having a building that's in C3 commercial where we don't have a lot of commercial and struggle to get commercial into the city. And we have a large number of students that'll be occupying that structure, taking the pressure off of our residential homes in our residential R1 areas. So it's a complex issue for us to look at. Parking is an issue. There are solutions to that. I think 2 or 3 times we've allowed that already in our developments around town. So it's not a new idea that we've shared in C3 areas. The question is 60 enough, and do we have adequate parking? I suggest that we could do some of the things that have been done downtown. We could go with limited time parking. We could require students who have their vehicles registered with the university and need parking to get a yearly permit at $30 to $70 a year, somewhere in that range. And they'd have to walk. The developer could be smart and require anybody who wants to use the parking places to show that they have a need to use their car every day and they need to have it close by. I don't know how much the problem that would take. I'm not saying it's a solution. But there are a lot of things we can do with parking if we jump outside the normal way of doing things and get a beautiful structure that's solving a lot of problems for us. So is parking solvable? I think if we put on our thinking hats, absolutely. I think the developer has recognized the need for parking by putting in 60 units, a long way from the 125 or 144 that's been mentioned. But there are other options for students in those areas. I lived on campus at Iowa State University and had a car. And I parked it a long way from where I live because I only used it on weekends to go home or go out and party hardy. So it's a difficult decision, but I wanted to bring out there are options other than just saying no. And the code is ambiguous, to say the least, on how you apply it. So it's a difficult decision. I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Whelan. Anyone else? Council, talk amongst yourselves. Yes, sir.
Just another question for Shane. We've talked about all these different ordinances, and there's also the ones regarding height and size of the building, space for the well-being and health of the tenant. I noticed that about 50 of the units have less than 500 square feet. Does it meet all those codes as well? Or do they not apply because of this being a commercial building?
You mean the size of the units?
Yes.
Well, I don't think there's a code requirement for how a minimum size of a unit. I guess I'm not following your question.
Well, I thought in the minimum rental housing code, does that only apply to houses as far as what the size of the rooms, the height of the ceilings?
Oh, I don't know, have the rental code right in front of me, but I believe, like the size of bedrooms, and, I think there's a minimum 100 or 120 square feet or something like that. I mean, I'm assuming it meets all of that. I guess I don't.
We don't know if it meets those codes, though?
The minimum rental
Yeah.
code? I guess not off the top of my head, I don't.
Okay.
When they submit for their building permit, we would review that per the fire code and make sure that the adequate distance or widths for kind of the kitchen area and the bedrooms are met at that time. So we would verify that.
Mr. Mayor? Mr. Miller? Well, the original intent of this C3 zoning ordinance, wasn't that a 70s ordinance kind of intended for downtown, for a typical building downtown with apartments above? Is that the interpretation of what the original intent was?
Much of our zoning code is based off of a 1970s model that we have made changes to and just kind of used and revised as needed when we see situations, and then adopted overlay ordinances to apply. So the C3 district is generally considered the area where we would see a higher density of commercial uses is what we'd want to encourage for walkability, and want to see mixed uses happening too.
Sure. Well, I think that, or if I can
Mr. Miller, go ahead.
continue. First off, I want to thank this developer for pushing this along, challenging our community and all of us up here and everyone else out here to see something different up on the hill. It's remarkable, really, in the whole scheme of things. If this ends up happening in some shape or form, it's going to change the hill tremendously. I love the density of it, the walkability, the livability, the neighborhood, how this can help the hill. Every business needs a certain amount of people within a mile to make it. And this is an opportunity for every business owner on the hill, I think, to see some more people up there. As far as parking goes, I can't get by the parking. And, I think minimum rental ordinance or minimum rental housing code, we required landlords to provide parking. So here we've got another situation where there's a loophole, if you will. And to me, I love the development, but I don't think you can throw 60 cars or, say there's 120 beds here and everybody's got a car. Because I think what landlords are seeing out there everywhere else is people still drive cars on a 1-to-1 ratio. So 120 cars, there's 65 spots. There's 60 vehicles that are going somewhere else, right? So then they've all got a friend. There's another 60 cars, and I don't think that we can get away from that entirely, but I think you park this and it calms a lot of nerves from the other residents. And I don't know to what level, maybe to an R4. I don't know, but I think if you get the parking taken care of, this thing helps College Hill, helps the neighborhood, helps the developer, and I think you can make it work.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Anyone else from council? Okay.
I would repeat Mark's appreciation of developers' investment throughout the community, and especially on the Hill at this point. I also share the concern about the parking. What I would hate to see happen is, number one, us deny this outright and discourage any future opportunity up there. But I also would hate to approve it at this point with all of the unanswered questions that we're asking at this point. I've heard something about that this is in direct violation of our ordinance, and I'm not professional enough to know that, and so I wouldn't mind getting a professional interpretation of if we're violating our very own ordinance. But there's so much potential up there. I think this proposal could be a model for future development in our community. I think the real elephant in the room, it's not even the elephant anymore. I think we all recognize that there's issues with our ordinance. And so to deny this and then go back and try to revisit the ordinance, we do need to revisit the ordinance. And I guess that would be my first priority, is that we look at this update it, make it more current, make it so it's equitable. A couple people have mentioned that, we spent 2 years developing an ordinance to monitor single-family homes that were converted to rentals. And we've had small business owners who've had to kind of stick their neck out to meet our requirements, pave our parking lots to meet our requirements, and then right down the road, we have a perfectly legal, apparently legal proposal here, but it's so inconsistent with what other people on the Hill are doing. And I think if we all work together and sing Kumbaya, I suppose, this could really be a really good thing. But I worry that we're going to be at a point tonight where we've got to be thumbs up or thumbs down, and I hope that isn't the case. That's my 2 cents.
Anyone further from council?
I would just echo Councilman Miller's thoughts as well. I know this council, and I in particular, have been pushing for development of this kind on the Hill for years, and this is the first developer to really take it seriously and commit to it. It is, I guess, somewhat concerning to me that both the College Hill Partnership and ISG are unable to support the project. And I think, again, to Councilman Miller's point, it comes down to the parking issue. Unfortunately, I don't think the city has the transportation infrastructure to make a carless living situation possible right now, and I think that falls to us, as does the zoning code that I think, again, is ambiguous. So I think there's some failures on our part here that need to be addressed. But it's a complex issue that I think we need to pay a little bit more attention to.
Anyone else from council? Mr. Green?
So looking at this, I appreciate the sides of those in support, those who are opposed to the project. And I see that we have significant leeway on council to make a verdict or decide on subjective matters. And it's the same thing I had with Board of Rental Housing appeals, that we could look at the character of the neighborhood, we could see, like we had a lot of levers that we could pull, a lot of things we could view to see whether a project should be approved or not. And for me, this is incredibly simple. And I think I overthought it when I first was looking through the council packet, when I also looked at the parking situation, the heights and everything else. But what it really comes down to is following the law. And I don't see that on council we have the right to create new stipulations into the ordinance where they don't exist. And I understand there's precedents for the past of how previous buildings were approved. I wasn't part of those. I wouldn't have approved those buildings as C3 if that's what had happened. Because as I read the ordinance, it's been stated before about how it's related to the main use of land or structures as distinguished from an accessory use. There's no mention of ground floor or how that came in. That's just been sort of brought into the code. So I can't approve or can't see to approve the project as it is now because of seeing that main use. The big question for me, what really brought it out was, okay, if we look at this being a 5-story building, what would happen if it had been proposed as a 6 or a 10 or a 20-story building? At what point does your credulity kind of get stretched to say, well, okay, this is probably commercial or it's probably residential. So I realize that that's pretty extreme, but that's where we're at today. And if we set this precedent now or continue the precedent, basically, it doesn't do the developer a service in the long run to have that ambiguity. It's something that, as we look at the code, yeah, certainly we absolutely have to revisit, because R4 is only 3 stories. And I think that's totally inadequate for what we want the city to become. So as much as I support like many of you, support the concept of the project, and I know it's going to move forward in the long run, and I'm really excited to see what will happen with it. I believe that if we vote in favor of a project that we support, but we violate the law, we've failed. Or if we base our vote on whether or not we support the project, we've also failed. So I see our first responsibility as being to the law itself, and then to work like mad after this to change the zoning or get things built so that we can approve these kinds of projects in the future and to do it legally. I yield my time.
I was going to ask a real quick question in relation to that. Mr. Gaines was, and I don't know the answer to this, but we have a good partnership with the university up there close to the hill, obviously. If the university was to come purchase any property in that same area, I can ask any of staff, do they have to follow the same process to build another answer hall, 16 stories? Do they still follow the city process, or do they not because they report to the Board of Regents?
We actually started doing a little research on that today, excuse me, and on their campus itself, we're sure that they don't have to come to Planning and Zoning Commission, but when they start to get out into different neighborhoods with zoning over there, we're unclear of what the answer to that is right now.
Anything further from council? Mr. Cruz?
Hearing all the comments, it seems like some people are thinking this is a yes or no, and if we say no, then nothing can be built there. We can certainly have a new building of some sort with new materials, looks good, incorporate a lot of students, but we have to take into consideration the welfare of everybody that's there currently and who we're going to draw into that area. There's got to be a balance, and this doesn't appear to be balanced at all, because dealing with college students or tenants for 32 years, you can't tell them where to park. You can require a UNI parking permit, but that's just another expense to go to school, just like buying a textbook. So it has to be balanced, and I don't see the balance here. There can be something else built there. There could be more land acquired for parking, what have you. I also don't see any way that this is going to draw anybody out of the single-family neighborhoods, because a tenant that moves out of the dorms, they go to apartment buildings, they eventually, by the time they're juniors and seniors and grad students, they want their own backyard, they want to have a dog, they want to play Frisbee, they want a fire pit. And as Maggie had said, students are not going to be drawn into this thing, except maybe some of the freshmen or sophomores. So,
thank you. Anything further before we move to the roll call vote as it's on the table?
Just for clarification, is there an opportunity to table this?
You always have that right to table, amend the motion if you so desire. Going once.
Call the question.
I would,
Call the question.
I would move that we table this. I'm not sure how to say that, except for further discussion and to resolve some of the, to be honest with you, table it and look at our ordinances and make them more consistent with what we need to have in an urban area like this.
I don't mean to be rude, Frank.
Oh, that's fine.
No, Sue had mentioned she had made a motion to call the question, previous motion, which is basically if she gets a second and a vote, then we go to a vote. If that fails, there still can be the option to table, or of course ultimately towards the original motion that's on the table.
I heard the motion, but I did not hear a second.
Correct. It is on the table to
What's this? Call the question.
To call the question.
in other words, in debate, and we need a vote on this, is what's before the council by Ms. DeBoer. So she needs a second, or we need a second to carry that to a vote?
Basically made a motion to vote on the issue.
okay.
Yeah.
But I need a second.
Second.
Motion and second? All those in favor say aye.
What?
So yes. So right now it is, we originally looked for AB as it is to approve the site plan. That's before council. The council has debated. The motion was to call to question. Let's go back and let's vote on this. So in other words, we're closing off debate. There's no opportunity to table. We just need to move on. It's been motion and seconded, and that can go forward and we vote, or it can fail if folks are thinking about tabling it or just having more discussion. Did I do that right?
Correct.
Attorney Rogers?
Point of privilege, Mr. Mayor. If we vote aye to move forward, then we can't table, correct?
Correct. We can then, however, move to decide on the project.
Thank you.
So the motion is now to move forward to a vote.
Correct.
Okay.
It's
So
been-
a comment, can I throw a comment then regarding
I
tabling?
don't believe there's no debate. We're answering questions, but as far as
Okay,
Sorry about that.
well, okay.
Yep. It's motion and second. Help me out, is this vote or roll call or voice?
Two-thirds vote on the motion.
Two-thirds voice vote on the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Nay.
Do I hear 4 nays? Can you raise your nays, please? There's 4 nays. That motion fails. It is now open to further discussion.
Motion table.
Second.
Motion and table. Brent, absolutely. I've been looking at you all the time.
I think when there's a motion to table, we can no longer have debate.
Well, council can't have debate. No. We're not going to start this up. We're going to work this out up here. Yeah, help me out in terms of moving forward. This is moving to a vote or to table.
You put the matter to a vote, debate was ended then.
Correct.
Council has the matter now.
We have the matter in order to table. And no, is further discussion allowed right at this point on the motion to table?
No.
No,
Could we clarify what's intended by it?
sorry.
What the expectation is for putting this on the table? The expectation being, I got to believe it's easier for the developer to modify this at this point versus starting completely over, so let's give him an opportunity to do that. Fix the parking.
I don't know that,
Mr. Miller.
Hold on, hang on a second. Can you answer that, Mr. Miller, Mr. Roger?
No, it's, the motion is simply to table the matter for now indefinitely until it's brought off the table later.
By a council referral?
Right. There's no condition other than you could specify how long it can be tabled for, but not on the condition that something else happens, no.
so if we table it, the code has to be clarified, and that could take months to do. If we say no, it's the same
Wouldn't
thing as
have to.
table.
It wouldn't have to. It'd be a matter of council bringing it forward and
Bringing it back up, sure.
staff. So right now, as I see it, we have a motion to table. There is no further discussion allowed.
Correct. If there's a second, I'm not sure we
I
have.
believe there was a second. However, I would like to recommend council, now that I know that there's folks who want to talk about it, continue to talk about it, to consider that in your table, your motion to table. We would then go right back to having the consideration of AB. The motion, yeah.
So, just clarify what you're asking, I think.
We're asking to table this, which takes it off the table this evening, removes it. If, correct?
Right,
Attorney
so-
Rogers? If it does not pass to table, it will be back, I can open it back up for discussion on AB. Correct?
Correct.
There could be another motion made to table.
And there could be another motion to table after that, if so desired.
So right now, no debate, there should be a vote on the motion to table.
Correct. I am going to call that,
Just to clarify, Kevin, if that fails, can it be, a new motion to table be made? It gets voted down, and it goes back up for consideration.
Well, then we're back to the original question. And so why would a motion to table that failed be followed by another motion to table?
because there's more discussion.
Debate.
Let's see. I don't believe the same motion to table can follow a previous motion to table. That matter would have been decided and the motion would have failed.
Okay. What I'm going to do as chair is we will vote on the motion to table. If there's further discussion, we've got public comments in about 5 or 10 minutes that would be opened up to anyone else who wants to discuss as we move forward. There's a motion on the table. There's a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Nay.
The motion carries. So we're done, right, with this item. Thanks, folks. I allowed a little bit more latitude as far as conversation. It was respectful. I want to make sure to have the dialogue with staff, with folks in the audience, and with council. So that just required a little bit more finality as we went through. I beg your forgiveness. I didn't say we're going to a vote before other comments could be made. These are the first parts, the folks we want to hear from, and then council does need to deliberate amongst themselves. I'm going to move on now to, I believe, item I. Is there a motion to allow bills and payroll, please?
Motion to approve bills and payroll, two
Motion.
payrolls.
Motion second. Any further discussion from council? Requires a roll call vote, please.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item J, City Council referrals. Does council have any items for referral this evening?
Mr. Mayor? I was hoping for some clarification from staff regarding council's role with boards and commissions, specifically P&Z, but in regards to conflicts of interest. I think there's some clarification due there.
Indeed. Well, indeed, it's a good question. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion second to have staff take a look at the role of council as it relates to boards and commissions. All in favor? Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries to that referral. Item K to City...
Excuse me, but can there be other referrals?
More referrals?
Sorry, there certainly can be.
I'm never quite sure anymore. And this may not be an appropriate time, but I would like to refer the previous discussion to some discussion in the near future. Mostly to look at our existing ordinances that were discussed tonight and try to develop some consistency and predictability for our developers.
There is a motion for referral as it relates to ordinance towards the hill. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion second. All in favor say aye.
I'm sorry, what are we're referring it to a committee, or were we to a staff?
Continue this discussion. I don't know that...
Isn't that the same as the table, or?
Pardon?
No.
Well, we tabled it, but I thought I heard we could bring it up in a future discussion, so I was referring it to committee.
Sure.
That's what I was asking, yeah.
Committee of the whole, is what you're saying? Okay.
So it has, I guess, been tweaked to refer to committee of the whole for staff to take a look at the ordinances on the hill. Is that good? Any further questions or discussion?
Could that include then the College Hill parking study and the Urban Flats parking situation?
I think whatever, all of the components of this that have been questioned tonight, it'd be nice to get to a point where we had an understanding of what primary use is, what parking requirements are, just so it's more predictable and consistent between the hill, downtown, other parts of the community. I don't know that there should be a difference necessarily.
Question. Is staff already anticipating or doing this? Is there any activity from staff at present?
Any activity towards staff in relation to the motion?
Yes, we had a discussion with the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting at their last meeting about some different options as we're considering some changes to the ordinance, and got some direction from them. And at this point, we're planning to talk with the College Hill Partnership, also with Community Main Street, about the potential ordinance that might move forward, just the concept of that before we start really reviewing draft language.
Any further discussion on this referral? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Any other referrals?
Mr. Mayor, request to refer to city staff and specifically the city attorney about the role of ex parte communications and clarification from the memo that we had, just 10 years old, from Steve Moore, on what we're allowed to do and allowed to speak about as council members, just for clarification on that and maybe an update of that memo based on current legal standing.
So there's a motion and a second to have staff come back with the ex parte communications update. Any further questions or discussions?
I'd like to, in that analysis where it states that it's very narrow focused on zoning, but here we're talking about parking and things that I would think we would want to have discussions with the public and hear feedback. Because the way it was stated in what I read, like I said, it was very focused on zoning. We're not changing zoning here. It's the interpretation of how the parking applies and so on.
Would it be mostly encompassing and towards the what our ex parte would refer to?
Basically land use, Mr. Mayor. So it would encompass all those issues just discussed this evening.
We were actually planning on having a committee meeting that That would include the Planning and Zoning Commission, Board of Adjustment, City Council, and him and the city attorney maybe go through a little training or just over that memo and ex parte communication.
Would that suffice?
No, because it's not just a matter of having training on what ex parte communications is, but actually interpreting based on what I feel was a very vague or easy to confuse memo. And so I'd had information from other council members of, yes, we can talk about this, what came up tonight, no, we can't, here's what you can say. So just an understanding of ex parte, is that something that is this dangerous thing that you cannot do at all, or is it that you just have to notify? You have to speak out ahead of time, and so it's okay as long as it's open. So just understanding more just the overall expectations and having a say on how we'll proceed forward and a common understanding, so there's not confusion for residents, and that we have a clear process of outlining for each issue that comes up, whether it's quasi-judicial or not, well in advance.
I agree totally with that, because even in the memo we received, there was differencing of opinions between the attorneys in that very same memo.
I think we're encompassing that with the motion and second, unless council disagrees. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Referral, that motion carries. Anything other further referrals for this evening?
I would hope we add this to our working session that's coming up.
Certainly could.
Good.
Thank you, Councilman. Moving on to item K, any city council updates this evening?
Mayor?
Yes, Jennifer.
I just wanted to recognize Jackie Danielson tonight for earning her Master Municipal Clerk designation. She had already been a certified one, but this is the next level. Jackie's been with the city for 29 years, been the city clerk since 2014, but I think it's just just want to commend her on continuing her professional development and earning her designation.
Speech.
No, it's getting late.
It's getting late. If there's no further updates, Item L is a public forum. Speakers will have one opportunity to speak for up to 5 minutes on topics germane to city business. Is there anyone here from the public that would like to speak tonight? Name and address if you don't mind, sir.
Yeah, Brent Dahlstrom, 5016 Samantha Circle, Cedar Falls, Iowa. Thank you for all your service and for continuing to have a bold vision for Cedar Falls. It was a great discussion tonight, right? We've been here for over a year, and some of these things are the things that I wanted to hear. But I do want to have an open discussion regarding some of the things that were said tonight, and I'll try to say within the 5 minutes, or maybe I'll have to come back. One thing that was talked about was the inability, over the past few weeks, I was directed to not speak to any of you or any of the Planning and Zoning Commission. So it's very hard for me to discuss a project of this size or in this nature, right? And so, I asked for maybe small groups or anything like that, and just so I could get a feel of where we could go, and I was told that that wasn't possible, which was an interesting stance because that wasn't ever said before or in this city or others that I've been a part of. The competitors of College Hill have written, and I'm glad we didn't get a lot of this, but I've had the chance to read things that people wrote that maybe it was a loophole or maybe it was a special deal for Brent Dahlstrom or me in particular. And it was an interesting thing to read because I've developed many projects in R4 in this city that have been parked, including one right there on College Hill right behind Domino's that was fully parked, right? So it was an interesting stance to take that, and I wish I'd get away from that. I wish that people wouldn't write the things that they said because, I'm proud of the city. I'm proud of what I've done and developed and what we've done together. And I hope that we can stay away from that. And then we get back to the zoning. And there's an interesting discussion tonight because on one hand, I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, they're asking me to put 2 more floors of commercial, right? So 2 more floors of commercial and maybe take away the parking because then it would meet the zoning, right? And I found that interesting. The Sycar College building would not have been allowed under this idea. The Domino's building would not have been allowed under this concept of fully parking. And so I even looked to the C3 zone and what is a very small area on the map, right? And so you asked me to provide more parking. I asked how. I tried to provide more on the first floor, and you said you had to have more commercial. So then I went underground, which I would have to stand corrected, but I don't know if there's another building in Cedar Falls that has underground parking. So then I looked to the neighbors, which are some of the competitors of College Hill, and the number that they want for the neighboring property has increased dramatically. And so I sit here, and I'm in a really tough spot. I'm in a spot where, should I add commercial? Should I make it a half hotel, half residential place, which I'm, considering over here as I sit here in the room? Do we work together? Do we look at other cities like my letter suggested and see what other people are doing? I really respect the input of the belief of the problem or what it is. And so, some people have also quoted me on saying, how many college kids have cars? It is true. U.S. News and Report, 75% of UNI students have cars, okay? 51% of Iowa State does and 18% of Iowa. That is a fact by U.S. News and Report. So that is a hard one to dispute. That is the truth. Am I going for the 75% in this project right next to campus? No, I'm not. I believe there's a very small window in a very small area of town where I could go for the 25% and hopefully more that want to live in a walkable area. If you take away the C3 zoning, you won't see development. I think of a guy like Dave that came up that owns the Octopus. I cringe at the day that his place falls down or burns down because there will be no one that can redevelop that property. I'll tell you what I would do. Instead of buying C3 properties, I would buy R4 because it'll be the same standard. I'll have to park it. So why would I be encouraged to develop in the area that the rental code just asked me to do? This would take away the ability to develop in C3. I mean, I don't know if that's making any sense, and I'd like to open that up to conversation, and that's why I wanted to meet with everyone. But those are some of just the small thoughts. Urban Flats, Shane came to my office, he looked at it. I take my official business with the city very seriously, right? And so if we don't want them to park back there, I'm all for making that not an overnight city lot. I think it's a great idea. I think it's an excellent idea. If there's 23 people parking overnight there, let's get them out. The city can do that, right? Let's open that up. Those are all discussions I'd love to have, but I'm not being provided the opportunity, and that's very frustrating, Mayor.
It is. It is very much frustrating for myself and everyone on the dais here. And that came around, I believe, from a memo from our legal team 10 years ago, roughly, right, of the ex parte communications, where this is a quasi-judicial board at this point in time. And there's a conflict for every one of us because we were elected to represent the folks. So not to be able to talk to the folks. We're going to have a discussion, as it was referred to just a few minutes ago, to see where they can be pushed, in my humble opinion, and where others might want to land on that.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
No, you didn't. And one more thing I'd love to bring into the discussion is there was something written by a competitor of mine in the room that there was illegal things that I did with the city staff, and that there's certain council members that agreed with that statement, and it's hurtful, right? It's a strong statement to make. It's a very strong allegation to make about me, and I would like to, if I can't talk, I would like to see those conversations that happen where those people are saying those things so I could defend myself. I'd love to open it up now, but thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dahlstrom.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Public comment?
Chris Warnemont, 415 1/2 Washington Street. Just a few quick points. One, I'm not sure why, just because you would deny this building in its state right now, that means that we can't have development in that area. Those lots are not going to go wasted. They will get developed. They may not get developed with a 5-story building, but that doesn't have parking, but I would think that actually benefit the community. What I would like to ask Mr. Dahlstrom actually is how many parking spots? All right, well, I'd like to ask this question. How many parking spots?
Thank you.
Not for him, for anybody. How many parking spots at that property are used for commercial, the commercial buildings? If it's a commercial building, I would think, and I would definitely have parking spots for those commercial pedestrians. I'm not seeing any. Maybe I'm wrong. I do not see any of that. Also, the scale of the buildings. UNI doesn't abide by the rules of the city of Cedar Falls. They can have whatever they want. So I challenge you to show me a building in Cedar Falls in the College Hill neighborhood that is over 3 stories tall. They do not exist. It doesn't happen anywhere. The idea that, well, Sidecar and Domino's, those are 2-story buildings. This all would work out. I wouldn't be up here if it was a 2-story building. I promise you that. And I don't think any of the other people would be up here as well. Just to clarify, it is 196 spots by current city code, not 144. So 64 is not as much as you would think. There's a lot of spots that a lot of tenants that still will need parking spots. If this is also such a great idea, then I would say, planning and zoning passed this on to you guys, and then the very next item was to close this loophole and say, no, we're going to require secondary parking for accessory uses. If this is a great idea, then what are we doing? Let's keep it open and let everybody go at it. I don't think that's what's happening. It seems to me, I'll say it right away, it's a little bit preferential treatment going on. Last thing, I just want to understand how 17% will ever trump 83%. It doesn't happen. It's mathematically impossible. So how does 17% trump 83% of a building? That's the primary use is residential. Plain and simple. So a faulty interpretation of how we used to look at code doesn't mean that we have to do that forever. They used to let people hack up single-family homes into 5 apartments. I don't see that going on, nor do I see people coming up saying, hey, you have to let us do this. It changes, it evolves. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment? Sure.
Cara Bigelow Baker, 1826 Quillen Lane. One thing that just struck me as odd when Mr. Dahlstrom was up here is instead of taking the comments as they were and considering changing the building, still including commercial on a level, maybe changing the number of residential units, bringing it down, he thought immediately of adding commercial space, which would reduce the number of residential spaces, leaving the building the same size, not including any parking. So to me, that doesn't show a willingness to kind of envelop and listen to a lot of the criticism of the problems that are going on in the area surrounding this unit. It just shows that he is more interested in maximizing his dollar, which I understand. As a business person, that's what you do. That's what I want to do too. But without my customers being able to drive up and find a place to park, they're not going to do that. You can put 3 stories of commercial space there if you want, but it's not going to be a destination point for Cedar Falls for people to come to the hill if there's no place for them to park. You talk about a progressive building, you talk about a wow factor for College Hill. When you go to Des Moines, when you go to Cedar Rapids, when you go to Iowa City, when you go out of town, Minneapolis, and you go to these destination cities and you want to enjoy yourself and be entertained and see something new, where do you park? You park in a ramp, and then you walk or you Uber. And then where do you go? You go to a nice restaurant, you go to a nice shop, you go to a theater, you go to some form of entertainment that we don't have here. And this building isn't going to provide any of that. The 2 small spaces of commercial area representing 17% of this entire building is not going to bring in a theater. It's not going to bring in a wow factor that's going to require the city to build a parking ramp for all of these people who are going to want to flock to College Hill because it's now become a destination area. This is an apartment building. It's an apartment building for college students. And the studio apartments that he increased on the second revision actually helps maximize his profit, because studio apartments rent for more than a single bedroom. So keep in mind that the neighborhood area is not concerned with maximizing profit. Do we want business? Yes. The only way to get business is for them to have somewhere to park. And college kids who have to walk is not going to increase my business. They're not there at spring break, they're not there at Christmas break, and they're not there during the summer. And they are not my bread and butter. The citizens of Cedar Falls who support all of you are the ones that support me. And they drive because they don't live there. And they're the ones that support my business and the other businesses on the hill. And that's what you need to keep in mind. You need to keep in mind all of the citizens of Cedar Falls and not just what's in the best interest of one developer. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comments from the public? Hearing and seeing none, I would offer a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried, we are adjourned. Thank you.